Greetings, compadres. Welcome back to Eternally Amy and the Boozeless Book Club. And I would like to introduce the Boozeless Babes. So we look a little different tonight. I'll get to that. But first of all, we have Sarah Alaimo. She is an author. She's a career happiness coach, and she's a new mom, and she's crushing it, just saying. Next, we have Carolyn Bunn. She is a business manager of mine, and she is an amazing travel blogger, and she goes everywhere. She just got back from, I'm going to call it Chile. Is that the correct pronunciation? Okay. Wonderful. So. Okay. And then we have Alysse Bryson, and she is the founder of the Sober Curator, and she is also the vice president of community development, and that is at the Intentional Sidekick. And P.S., these are my buddies. And here's the deal. We look like this if you are watching this instead of listening to it, because ding, 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 we read the Matthew Perry memoir, which is called, well, I'm going to have Carolyn read the little blurb, so I'm going to let you know about that. But we are also fans of the show Friends, if you couldn't already tell, if you are watching this instead of listening. Look, and Alysse has like props, which she's putting up in the on the screen, and I hope she continues to do that. I don't know if you have like a bunch just like lined up or yeah. Okay. I love it. Everybody's got either some kind of either a prop or a background or a Friends themed something. So I don't know. We're all pretty excited to talk about this if you can't already tell.
Could I be
okay.
excited?
Right? So maybe real quick, I just want to let you know that I'm early Monica, hence my wig. And Sarah, would you like to introduce who you are representing?
When Rachel and Ross get married in Vegas, I believe she goes by Mrs. Rachel when they're drunk and Ross is drawn on her face, or maybe he's just Mr. Ross. I don't recall exactly, but one of my favorites.
Yes, yes, yes. Very good. And then Alysse has some huge cardboard cutouts of the friends behind her, and Carolyn is in the apartment, the ladies' apartment. Hey.
Hey.
So, all right. So I'm going to turn it over to Carolyn, who will read the blog. Sorry, not the blog, the blurb.
All right. Well, there were many blurbs to choose from because this is a very popular book. So the blurb that I chose came out of today.com, and it's just a little short review on this book. And it says, Matthew Perry is letting it all out. In his new memoir, Friends, Lovers, and the Big Terrible Thing, out November 1st, the actor gets candid about some of the moments that have shaped his career and personal life, including his battle with addiction and living under the spotlight. Perry spent years making the world laugh through his role on Friends as Chandler Bing. But as the memoir shows, he was struggling behind the scenes. After decades of managing the highs and lows of his career while living with the big terrible thing he calls addiction, Perry is publicly reflecting back on his life. And then it goes on to say, here are some of the major revelations Perry shares in the tell-all, from romantic relationships and almost relationships with fellow celebrities to behind-the-scenes memories with friends, which we're going to talk about.
Yay. Thank you so much. We also, P.S., I'm going to just sidebar point out that we have some great t-shirts. Alysse is wearing a Central Park t-shirt and overalls, of course, because this was the 90s. And I am sporting my Giants. I don't even know what you're going to call it besides jean jacket with flare. All right.
Flare. That flare, girl. I love that flare.
And my hot cross buns t-shirt, which you can't really see, but I just had to throw that on because I have it and I never get to wear it. And it's not really appropriate, but I thought I'd put it on. There you go. So ladies, I know. Okay. So let's see. 2 of us on here have done a Quitlet. We have all on here read lots of Quitlet. And How does this compare? How did you like it? What did you think about it? Do you want me to call on people? I don't know if that's
I know. We're all too polite to not talk over each other.
Should I call on people? Would that be easier?
Sure.
Okay. All right. Alysse, start us off if you would.
Okay, so I bought the book, got it on Amazon, and I was really happy when I got the notification on my security camera system that it was delivered first thing the morning of November 1st. Like literally, it showed up at 6 a.m., like literally at 6 a.m. However, I didn't read it because I listened to the Audible because I wanted to hear it in his own voice. We don't have to talk about how different his voice is these days compared to how it used to be.
Yeah.
But like, I definitely wanted to hear it in his own voice. So I finished it last night, and overall, 2 thumbs up. I love the book. I didn't love everything about the book. I found some parts of the jumping around of the timeline a little confusing to follow the Audible version, and I'm gonna guess it was probably would have been confusing reading it as well. But overall, you guys, I love Quitlet Memoir. You can't see it, but I'm in my office. I have 2 bookshelves on either side here of my desk, which, fun fact, my desk is a ginormous cassette tape desk. I wish you could see it, but anyway, my shelves it's my Quitlet library. So like if it's out there, I have it, because when I got sober, besides the big book, there was like 4 books in the self-help section at Barnes and Noble back in 2006. And so there's been an explosion over the years, and I just keep gobbling up every book that I can. So I definitely have a library. He definitely needed to go in it. And I think my favorite thing about it, big picture, was how apparent to me that he has clearly spent thousands of hours sitting in church basements, and he at least knows the words of the big book inside and out. How well he practices the steps, I don't necessarily know that I got clarity on that. I mean, he talks about amends a few different times throughout the book, and he talks about service work a few different times. But like how good of a program he has as a chronic relapser, I had more questions that I wish I could ask him. So Matthew, you could call me, we could talk about it. I'm happy to meet you in a church basement. But that for me, as someone who loves a 12-step program and has been in one for a really long time, and really gets tired of the shit that it gets and people saying that it doesn't work. I mean, you could argue that it didn't work for him either when you look at all of his chronic relapses. I can't talk tonight because I'm just that excited. But he did keep coming back to it, right? So addiction is hard. I don't care what methods you use to get there. 12-step is most certainly not the only way. But I get a little bent out of shape for the people that are anti 12-step, because I kind of feel like, listen, I'm not shitting on your path. Don't shit on mine. Right. So overall, loved the book, loved how much his lingo is similar to my own lingo. I loved hearing about all of his sexual relationships.
I know.
I loved hearing about, I felt for him as a 5-year-old, traveling by himself, on a plane between Canada and LA when his parents got divorced. And my parents have been married for 50 years. So I don't know what it's like to have to fly back and forth between 2 different homes. And that must have been, and obviously we don't do that anymore in this day and age, but back then, yeah, you did put your kid on a plane by himself. It never occurred to me how scary that must have been, right? There were parts that were a little bit hard to swallow because it's like he spent a lot of money on his recovery. And that most people don't have that kind of money to spend or waste or invest on their recovery. So like, I don't necessarily know how I feel about all of that, but as someone who has seen every episode of Friends probably at least 3 times, and I think I've seen all the movies he's been in, overall, big fan. Glad he didn't die when his colon burst. Glad that he realizes now that, you know, his job on earth is to share his story to help other people. Big fan of that. Glad that I read the book. I would probably read it again.
Totally. I love that. Thank you. Thank you so much. Agree with all that for sure. Sarah, tell us what you thought.
I loved it. I've been telling everyone about it and sharing links on Audible. You know, I have written my story, and I know how hard it can be to be in it and writing it. And I think he mentions that at one point, like that was his story was in him, and to sit down and kind of relive everything had to be so hard. And I too listened to it on Audible. I wanted to hear it in his voice. And I know how hard that can be too, to read your own story out loud and be there in the silence. Gosh, when I first started listening to it, I just wanted to hug little 7-year-old Maddie so hard. I just felt for him. I was shocked that they would give a newborn baby, but I don't recall what the drug was. I had to look it up, and I had to ask my husband about it. I was just shocked because I myself have a 4-month-old, and I can't imagine giving him anything like that. We're so crazy careful with what we give him because both my husband and I are alcoholics and addicts. Totally connected with him on the tennis. I too thought I was awesome, and never really was going to go anywhere, but it was cool to hear that about his story. Gosh, I just could connect with him so much. I didn't ever, drugs are not a part of my story, but it's always just so amazing to me how people can live through some of that just crazy insanity of this disease, how we can get so close to just killing ourselves and making that decision. I could connect with him so much on that. And I was listening to it in the car the other day as the sun was coming out from this torrential downpour. And it was the part when he was talking about reading the part in the big book where it describes, you know, that we are not, it just describes who we are as alcoholics, and just having that realization that he wasn't alone. And I just started bawling because I remember reading that and hearing that too, and having that connection. So it was just more examples of how amazing it is when one alcoholic can chat with another, that we can just, no matter how our stories look, our stories are the same. I cannot take myself seriously with this stuff on my face. I know. It's not even, so it's bothering me. My mustache is not even.
Can I ask, is it eyeliner? What did you use to put on? How did you do it?
It is an eyeliner, and I'm so bad at makeup. I don't ever use eyeliner. I didn't know it was going to dry so fast.
I love it.
I'm sure I've seen every episode of Friends at least once, if not a million times. So it was really cool going through the book and hearing, you know, where he was in his life. I would never have guessed. I mean, I know there was that season that he was super thin, but I just would not have guessed. And especially, you know, being an alcoholic myself, I can't imagine turning out work like that, living such a public life at the bottom, and so many bottoms. I just wanted to hug him.
I know, totally. And the hangover thing too. I was like, when he was talking about functioning with hangovers, I was like, oh, can't imagine. How about you, Carolyn? What did you think?
I really like this book, and excuse me, compared to, you know, other quit lit books that I've read. I've obviously read yours and Sarah's and Catherine Gray. And reflecting on that, those have all been female stories. And so it was interesting to read the story from a male perspective. And obviously, like you said, Alysse, he's put a lot, it's a little bit different because he's put so much more money behind it. And so some of the stories were a bit more extreme, like the one where he went to, was it Sweden on a private jet and back just to get, I was like, wow, you just spent the equivalent of my house on two plane rides so that people wouldn't, you know, see you. So just to hear those stories was pretty crazy, but I really enjoyed reading it. And I think, you know, one of the differences between this book and some of the other books that I've read is that it's a reminder that addiction shows up for people in different ways. And so a lot of the books that I've read are more based around alcohol, and this was kind of a combination of the two. And to see that, and like you said, Alysse, it was kind of hard to tell in the timeline, like when he was sober, when he wasn't, and I wasn't getting a true idea of how long it was lasting, but it was pretty obvious that it keeps coming back, and it keeps coming back. And he's at the point now where even if he takes drugs, there's not enough drugs that will get him high because his tolerance is so high. So it is a reminder that people do continue to struggle with this, and not to compare those people's journey to somebody else's journey who may have had it easier or gotten sober on the first try, and that everybody's journey is different.
Mhm. Yeah, I love that. It's so true. And yeah, when he was talking about the plane to Sweden, it reminded me so much. Like, I thought that was just such a great example of the idea of desperation, right? When you get to the point in your use where it's like, you'll do anything, to get the next fix or the next drink. I just thought that was really good. The other thing I liked too was his candor when he was talking about his season of impotence. And then, I thought that was really brave, and I loved it. I love when people will just get a pair of balls and say like how it was,
Even if they don't work.
even if they don't work. Totally. And I loved at the end too, when he was talking about his current singleness and how, he feels about that and regrets that he has about letting women go who were great women in his life and who he kind of messed up with. And I just thought that was great. I really always appreciate that kind of authenticity and transparency. Yeah, and the other thing that I liked was the way he would describe pain. I was like, wow. It sounded very intense. And I thought, gosh, I wonder, is that a thing? Can you break or bust your receptors so that you are no longer affected by any kind of painkillers anymore? I don't know. I don't know if that's a thing, but he was pretty descriptive. And when he was talking about like the toothache and all that, or when his teeth were messed up, and it's just, the lengths that we go to as addicts or alcoholics or sufferers from substance use disorder. It's like, you get to that place of just being so uncomfortable and kind of what to do about it. And I thought he was really descriptive in that. And I appreciated that he talked about all of his relapses, because I think that, and maybe this is because I grew up in the church, but there's a tendency sometimes to be like, here's how horrible my life was. And then something happened and it was like pink cloud forevermore. Everything was lovely and fairy tale. And I'm exaggerating a little bit, but sometimes there's that arc, that sort of this kind of simple explanation of like, now it's all better and yay. and I just felt like he didn't do that. I kept being surprised, like because I also listened to it on Audible. Every time he mentioned another relapse, I was like, oh my gosh, again, oh my gosh. And again, as has been mentioned, I wasn't sure if that was just kind of a little bit of the meandering story. Maybe it was a different time than I was thinking it was, but it was quite a few relapses nonetheless, I think. And I just thought that was brave too.
Well, and I think with all the relapses, I have met lots of people in the last decade that are at a celebrity status that are also in recovery. And it is not easy. I am not a celebrity, so I have not personally experienced it. But from the vantage point that I have had, the glimpses into that life that I have had, and the things that are offered to them and the temptations, and then the village that is going to be there to clean up all the messes and not have the consequences. be clear, the only reason I got sober is because of my consequences, right? And every time he talked about the vodka bottle with the handle, right? I know that bottle, right? I am a vodka bottle with the handle, which means I'm the half gallon, full gallon girl, right? Like, so like I understood that language intimately. And every time he said with the handle, I was like, oh man, I get you, you know? But if I had all the resources and temptation coming at me and people cleaning up my messes, I don't know that my story would have been any different than his, right? Even though I'm sure every time he got sober and had a year here or 2 years there, I'm sure he worked really hard. I'm sure he really wanted it. I can't, recovery is such a personal, it's such a personal thing. You can't just follow 12 steps and it just perfectly magically all happens, because there's not, it's a daily deal. There's not a destination. You don't reach like level 26 and all of a sudden you're cured, right? So my heart really empathized with him because of the fact that people think that celebrity and wealth, all they do is just bring you bigger problems, just bigger problems and bigger temptations. And I'm sure that ended up just being such a crutch for all those relapses. And, what I kept thinking about listening to the book is, what happens if when or if he relapses after this book and after all these interviews and after all these articles, like a year from now, 2 years from now, did he write the book as maybe some insurance, right? Because for me, I stay in a 12-step room, I go to therapy, I do all these things, sometimes better than others, sometimes more or less, but I never stop doing all the things completely because it's my insurance. And I love insurance. I have insurance on everything. I have insurance on my dogs, right? I have insurance on myself, on my house, on my cars, health insurance. I mean, if I buy something from Amazon and it says, do you want to add on insurance for $4.99? Yes, I do. I want insurance on everything, right? So to me, I kept wondering, is he writing this book as a way that if he gets tempted, he'll go back and listen to his own words? Like what really drove him to write the book? I know it's to help people, and I think it will, right? And I've read a couple of articles. I think I sent one to you ladies earlier this week, some people that are kind of giving him shit for talking about how much money he spent on recovery. And it's like, you know what? That was within his means. He had the access. I have spent a ton. If you look at how much money I've spent on recovery over the 16 plus years I've been doing it, compared to the income that I had percentage wise, not sure it's that different, right? If you just looked at it by percentage and not the actual numbers with the decimal points and the commas, right? So, I don't know. There's so many questions I would love to ask him. But I do think his story was brave. I really love the moment when he talked about doing his fifth step with his sponsor at whatever park with the view, where Gandhi's ashes were nearby and the wedding was nearby, and that there was some kind of spiritual awakening that happened in that process because he realized he was the problem, right? He was the problem, not his mom or his dad or this or that or that, whatever. He was the problem. And that is, for me, I had to get to that point in order to start actually creating change in my behavior. Because for me, the alcohol and the drugs are just symptoms of what the real problem is. And the problem is really me. And I think he did a really good job of owning his side of the street to the best of his ability in a public way.
I agree. I was reading through some of the reviews on Amazon, and some people didn't seem to catch that part. And maybe that's just those of us hearing those sorts of things that are in the program. I haven't read a Quitlet that really talks as much about AA as this one.
He did a lot. He did.
He did. Even places where some people might not even know it, because he was using the lingo, like you said.
It's the language. Yeah.
And, just that feeling of, he's like, I don't get to be anonymous. And I was thinking about, he's talking about speaking at a speaker meeting.
Mhm.
That's huge.
Yeah.
And he doesn't get to be anonymous, because think about it. There's no way if he goes and he speaks at a really large, let's say it's a 200 person AA meeting, that at least 20 to 30% of the people in that room did not keep it anonymous, right? Because they're human and they're not perfect. And the temptation to tell someone is too big, right?
Yeah. Well, I think that's such an interesting point to the whole celebrity thing, because, Anthony Hopkins, I've heard several recordings of him sharing, and he's at these like packed house meetings, right? And during COVID, I got a text from somebody and they were like, Anthony Hopkins is going to be sharing tonight on this Zoom link, and all this. And I was like, what? And of course, like I tried to log on, but they were already over whatever their person limit was and all this. And I was like, yeah, hashtag such my life. But yeah, I think the whole celebrity thing is really interesting because and I kind of just outed Anthony Hopkins, so I apologize. I shouldn't have done that.
I think he has outed himself.
Pretty
Yeah,
open.
I think,
okay,
I think he's pretty
Yeah.
much put it out there.
I keep having like a hair kind of fly in front of my nose. I'm sorry. But anyway, I think, I was thinking about it when you were talking, Alysse, about, just the celebrity part of it has got to be really hard. And some of us know of a local celebrity here who's sober, and it's just I think a tough line to walk, because that local celebrity was approached by a local club and was asked to donate money to it, a large sum. And I don't know, it's got to be tough, because just where you want to go, where you can feel safe and experience some healing, right? And be vulnerable and be open. And then I'm going to use the phrase, somebody takes advantage of that, but that might not have been the motive. But I feel like that's kind of what it looks like to me from this vantage point. That would be really difficult for me in those shoes. And I think it's tough. I think you just probably question everybody's motives on why they would want to, get close to you, or, I just would be very guarded in my shares in meetings. I would imagine that's how it would be anyway. So
I've seen it. I've seen celebrities in church basements in Washington State, in California, on Zoom meetings, and they do get treated differently. And it's and not by me. I'm not saying that I don't like fan them from afar and like hang on their every word, but I don't tell people that I see them, and I don't go up and ask for an autograph like by the coffee maker, but they need that meeting just as much as I do, if not more. And I've seen how people just can't help themselves from fanning and fawning and doing those things. And I get that that's their human nature too, but like they still need a place to go. They still, they still put on their pants one leg at a time, just like we do, like they brush their teeth. That, celebrities are just like us. They're just exactly like us. And I just think that's such a big part of probably the chronic relapsing. Just seems really hard. And, he did talk a lot about the opioid addiction. And as someone who does have drugs, I did quite a few opioids and hallucinogenics and ecstasy and cocaine, like methamphetamines, heroin. I did it all. And that stuff gets a hold on you. And we've seen Dope Sick. We know the headlines. We know what those chemicals do to the brain, and how long the detox is out, and how painful it is. And he talked a lot about his skin crawling, and even just like getting off the Suboxone and like all that stuff like that. It's amazing that his body is still functioning. It's amazing that he woke up out of that coma. And so hopefully he does really realize he's still here for a reason and uses that reason for good. But yeah, so I appreciated that he was so candid at both the alcohol and the drugs being part of his story, because I personally identified with that.
Mhm. I thought it was interesting too. I mean, as I was reflecting on it, I was kind of thinking about what it must have been like to go through a period of time where you're on this top rated show, you're like living large, you're just, at this high in your life, probably literally and figuratively at the time. But I mean, I'm sure we've all had times in our life where we're just like riding high and we're like, oh my God, this is amazing. Whether it's like right after you've, launched your book or got a new job or something like that. And then, that ends or it kind of starts to fade away and you kind of feel like, okay, now what? Like, what's the next thing? And it sounds like he spent so much time, in this show, that was something that really defined him at the time, that afterwards I could really see that kind of losing your identity in that a little bit, and that being another reason for relapsing. And then also dealing with that as being a celebrity at the same time where you don't have that anonymity. Like I myself personally really didn't tell anybody that I quit drinking for an entire year because I just didn't want that pressure on myself to stay sober. And so I can imagine him, being so publicly sober and then relapsing, and that fear of people finding out.
Mhm.
That's a lot of pressure,
Mhm. He also talked about when he was at the pinnacle of the stardom, when the Friends was happening and the movies were happening, about the fact, and think about that time too, right? That was like late 90s, early 2000 period ish, right? So people were we still weren't talking about it. It was covered up. It was like, just fix it. Nobody acknowledged the elephant in the room. And he talked about Jennifer Aniston reaching out to him and like calling him on it, and are you okay, and things like that. But so many people were enabling and not talking about it because they just didn't want to talk about it. Or they don't, like, a lot of people don't talk about it because they don't really understand that it's a disease, and they just think it's a willpower thing. Like, well, he just needs to get it together.
Yeah,
Um,
like the BBC show that he was on.
mhm, mhm,
Yeah. And I think, he did a really good job of showing, not telling, the insanity and the insidiousness of the disease. And,
mhm.
like even in the big book, where it talks about in Bill's story, things were going terribly for him and then things were going great. And then, he would pull it all down with a sense of, quote, useless sprees where, the phenomenon of craving would kick in. And then he just was beside himself, just totally baffled as to, why he would have risked all these great things or messed up all these great things and, for the sake of a drink. And it's like, yeah, to the sober mind who doesn't understand that disease, that's totally understandable that it is actual crazy making to think about that kind of self-sabotage. So I thought he really demonstrated that insanity really well.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, the another part that stood out to me was, I think he was filming a movie in New York, and he had, I think I remember it was a time where he had two sober companions,
Mm.
and somehow he was still able to call, the concierge at the hotel and have them put the vodka bottle with the handle in the bathtub. And to me, I was thinking about, okay, let's say that I work at a hotel and I get a call from a celebrity like Matthew Perry to put a bottle of vodka in his bathtub. And at this point, people knew about it. His problem had been on covers of magazines. It wasn't a secret, like, especially in the 90s and the 2000s, like tabloids. I don't read really well. I look at the tabloids at the grocery store if I go to a grocery store now and don't have them delivered. But like the tabloids were really different then than they are now. I mean, they're in some ways. And so like, would I have done it? Would I have hid the vodka in the shower because I was getting paid to do it, or a celebrity was asking me? Maybe if I didn't have a knowledge of the disease, but what if I was somebody in recovery? Like, I don't know why I spent time like thinking about that. And then I was just like, and how do they get it past the sober companions? Because isn't that part of the sober companions' job, is to like, you know, hold the gate, right? Watch everything, because we're crafty fuckers. Excuse my language. I don't know. Like, there were just so many things that my mind would wander as I was listening to him tell his story. I did, though. I want to go back to talking about his voice, and I understand he's got new teeth and he's had a lot of medical things. So and with age, I think our voice gets different too. But there's something about his speech now that it was not hard for me to imagine when he is really intoxicated. He probably just sounded like a douche. Like, just like, can you imagine him just roaming around his mansion, just like, you know, like how unattractive that probably was. That stood out to me. Also, can we talk about Cameron Diaz punching him in the face? Because I'd like to talk about that. I thought that was really funny. I thought that was really funny.
Totally.
I felt like I was trying to keep track of all the women, and I was even texting Alysse. I was like, wait, who do you think this person was?
Yeah.
And we still don't know who the person who broke his heart at 30 was, right?
I don't know who it was. Do you guys know who it was?
I didn't even know.
In a movie
The
around
6-year
that
relationship,
time, and he
right?
just wouldn't say her name. I think the 6-year relationship was, I texted you, was it Alysse? Oh my goodness.
I Googled it.
The
So is
really-
that somebody different?
The really weird thing was that that person was on the Today Show yesterday.
Lizzie Kaplan?
Yeah, that one. Yes. That's who the 6-year relationship was, because I went down a rabbit hole at like 2 this morning, looking up like who she was married to and things like that. Oh yeah, and looking up all of Piers Morgan and everything. So yeah, I did end up finding some pictures of him at some really low points. I wasn't searching for them, but they came up as I was looking for other things, and just very unfortunate. You know, there aren't pictures of me on the street. They probably would be horrible and embarrassing, but those are all still out there for him. He was practically unrecognizable in a lot of the pictures.
Oh yeah. And I got sober before social media took off. So thank God, because I was a drunk dialer. So for sure I would have been a drunk poster, like for sure.
Oh, yeah.
And you know, and I also I drank. I mean, my drinking career happened in the 90s and the 2000s. So like most of my pictures were taken on film that you had to develop, and I didn't have a lot of money. So I don't have a lot of pictures of my drinking, right? And I was also a scrapbooker. So I cropped them and put stickers over the ones that weren't very attractive, right?
Yeah.
But he can't, like, that stuff's just out there. It's just out there, and it's never, yeah, you do a Google search and you don't even have to go that deep, and you can find a lot of really unattractive evidence.
Mhm.
Yeah. You know, and back to the voice, you know, that's just the example of what the drinking and mainly the drugs, I think, can do to you. You know, just the brain injury from all of that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I saw the Diane Sawyer interview before I read the book.
Me too.
And I think I saw the interview and did not understand that his voice was different for a reason. And I turned to my husband, and I remember saying something like, he doesn't sound very sober to me. And if it was said in the Diane Sawyer interview, it was more towards the end, or like I said it before that or something. And I totally judged it. I feel terrible that I did, but it was kind of contempt prior to investigation. But I was like, dude, he is so slurring his words. Like, he doesn't sound super sober. Hashtag not mega sober. But you know, I thought that's an important thing to realize too, is that the injuries that we collect in our disease and the scars that we have, they remain. Some of them are physical things that happen to us. And when he was talking about his lungs, oh, I just kept like deep breathing and trying not to like think about this guy on oxygen, and that was what he was thinking might happen to him, and just yuck. And then I was curious to know what you guys thought about, and it's kind of like a hot topic, so if you want to pass, totally fine. But the whole Suboxone thing, he was saying how he was maybe going to have to be on Suboxone for the rest of his life. And I felt badly for him. I totally believe there's a time and a place that, some people need to do that. And I don't know enough about it really to make a comment either way, but I was just wondering if either any of you three had thoughts on it.
I did not ever take Suboxone. I'm not saying I didn't need to, but that just wasn't part of my story. But I've worked with enough women over the years that have been on it, and and he talked about it, it is incredibly hard to come off that drug. Incredibly hard. And I've known many people who have struggled unsuccessfully coming off of it, and end up staying on it much longer than they should. And I'm a fan for harm reduction. I'm a fan for anything that keeps you alive. Like just him. And I don't think there's one or two or 10 right ways to do anything. And but I do think that it needs to be, if it's not, what I do know about it is if you're not working with the right doctor and you're just working with a doctor that just wants to keep writing prescriptions for writing prescriptions, there's no medical responsibility there, right? Like the goal shouldn't be to be on it forever. The goal should be to be on it for when you need it and then to stair step off. And it is really hard to stair step off. But from what I hear, it does help really a lot with a lot of the phenomena of craving. So I'm for that. But he talked about how hard that was and how much medical help he needed to come off of that, and how it just made his skin crawl, right? I don't know if that's exactly how he said it, but I don't have my own experience with it, but I've known enough people that have, that I as helpful as it is, it also, like, it seems like it's maybe not the easier, softer way, even though it may seem like in the beginning that it is,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know much about it, but I found it really interesting to listen to. But I did watch the show Dope Sick. Is that kind of like the same thing that they were talking about, where he's
Mhm.
going there every day and taking that dosage,
Mhm.
and that's
Mhm.
helping him get sober? Yeah.
Mhm.
And so that is my understanding of it, but I can't imagine how challenging it must be to get to that point where you have to make that
Yeah.
decision to be on that.
But I think that's why, like, a pill is not going to ever fix anything, right? Medication is not going to fix anything. Like, especially when the problem is like at a soul internal level, right? And so I think that's why you have to addiction has to be combated with many different things
Mm-hmm.
to achieve recovery.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I do worry, like I am a person who, because of my heart issues, like I'll be on heart meds for the rest of my life.
Me too.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm thankful that, it's not like painkillers and it doesn't, it's nothing in my head. But I'll tell you, I have had fears where I'm like, gosh, what if this medication poops out on me? And what if it doesn't work anymore? And then what, and I've had some future tripping about that. And I've really had to turn that over and just go, well, it's working today, and to be thankful for that. But I think that that's a really interesting thing. And especially talking about all of this, all this stuff with big pharma and this and that. And it's just a large topic that is complicated, and Yeah. So I think that this was an interesting piece of that for me when it was kind of interwoven, right? His OxyContin. I mean, he basically said that was he said it was booze and OxyContin, and that it doesn't even affect him anymore is basically what he said. Like it doesn't even do anything for him.
Mhm.
And that was wild. Just thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, I did enough drugs over the years that I still, even after being sober for as long as I've been sober, my tolerance is incredibly high. So when I am in a situation like a surgery where I actually need something, like I have to have a whole plan with my care team around it. And I have to talk about why I might need a little bit more because I'm not going to feel it. And like when I had my heart surgery, the drugs that they gave me should have knocked me out. I was talking the whole time. Obviously it was not open heart surgery. So they went in, they put a stent in. So but I was, and in part it was like I also loved it because I was like freebie, but I've had dental work over the years where I've had to, I do believe that you do need to manage pain when you're in recovery, because if you don't, what's going to happen if I'm in so much pain and it's not being managed? I'm going to grab the vodka bottle with the handle. Right. So you do have to manage pain, my opinion, for my decisions for my life. But yeah, so I do understand that when you take enough of certain things that they just no longer have the effect that they used to have. I mean, that's same with alcohol too.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I can identify with that as well. In terms of, I mean, and drugs weren't even a thing for me, but I'm a natural redhead. Shocking, I know, with my early Monica wig on, you couldn't tell. But my husband and I both are redheads from when we were super little, like shiny copper penny red. And apparently redheads process pain differently than other people. So whatever that
Really?
means, yeah. And for me, it means it takes a lot more to get my pain under control than the average person, which is so interesting. And I guess for a long time, they thought that was an old wives' tale. And then they started doing some research on it because enough like folks in the medical profession, came forward and said, yeah, this is a thing. We see it all the time. Like it's not just people are just, blowing smoke. And so I sometimes will get a little bit of a small measure of fear around that because I'll think, oh my gosh, somebody's going to think I'm drug seeking, or, I'll have some kind of a weird, let's make this about me and but really, yeah, I think it's kind of a strange narrative that we have going nowadays where, how do I want to say this? Like doctors rightfully kind of may assume that people are seeking narcotics without reason, or maybe they fear that a patient is addicted, which is completely understandable because so many have, faked it because of an addiction, not even maybe aware that it was an addiction yet. But there are also legitimate, I mean, I have a friend who had a terrible case of strep throat and she was accused of drug seeking. And she was like, look, I'm just here because I need to know if I have strep throat or if I have COVID. I don't know. Right. And so it's sort of like a jump to conclusions thing where I don't feel like that was a great plan of action by that physician. But what do I know? I don't know anything about the circumstances, but I think it's tough all around. I think it's tough for doctors. I think it's tough for patients, and it's tough for addicts because we still are really slowly moving the ball forward, right, on changing the stigma. And we've come a far way-ish, but we still have more to go. And I think, as I kind of start to wrap up, and I'd love to hear if you guys have any final thoughts, but I want to say how much I appreciated this book, in that even if, and I hope this doesn't happen, but even if Matthew ends up relapsing again, or, falls, prey to misery and depression, page 52, and then eventually succumbs to the urges of the disease, I hope that he can look back at his piece of writing and be encouraged that it works. It works when we're doing all the things, and sometimes we're not doing all the things. And so we're a little bit more exposed, sort of like my wig cap. But and then we can, be at a greater place of temptation for relapse. And that's the story of some folks. I hope that doesn't happen, but I hope that if that were to happen, that he would just keep going, just come back, and, we don't shoot our wounded. And I felt that spirit in him kind of come through, that he appreciated the sober life. And I thought that was beautifully shown. So
I think his book is going to help and save and change people's lives. I think that I appreciated that he didn't trash or promote AA. It was just part of his story, a big part of his story. And I appreciate that, but I also appreciate there were lots of other things he had to do. So I'm glad he wrote the book. I'm glad I read the book. I'm glad I listened to it on Audible.
Right on.
Though relapse is not a part of my story, I do truly believe that, whatever he's learned throughout all of his relapses from his recovery from AA, he's not going to forget it. So, he could relapse, but, I believe that what he wrote at the time was something that he truly believed and felt. And, maybe he'll have another beautiful spiritual awakening in a kitchen if he needs it.
Lovely.
I really enjoyed this book a lot. I listened to it on Audible, and I listened to it all at once because I was on this really, really long hike. And so I listened to it while I was hiking in the down in South America. But I enjoyed the entire thing, like all the way through. And I'm probably not as like, if anybody's listening and is like, oh, I'm not as huge of a Friends fan. I haven't watched all the Friends episodes. I mean, I don't dislike it, but I was never like probably as a huge of a fan as you guys are. But if you're kind of on the fence and you want to listen to it, I would say, just as somebody that as a kind of a bystander, if you will, I found it fascinating. I loved hearing all the behind the scenes, and it makes me want to go watch the episodes now, like kind of understanding about, what was happening during that time. The fact that he was in rehab when he got married on the show. And I really appreciated the candor and just how true he was. Like we were talking about, it's not just like the one and done. I mean, obviously he's had his struggles, but just the fact that he was willing to put his story out there, no matter what happens in the future. Maybe it is kind of that insurance of, hey, I this can't happen to me again, and I'm going to share this with other people and help them. So definitely recommend the book. Loved it.
I love that you went on vacation with Matthew Perry. Like that's you went on a hike with Matt.
I went on a hike with Matthew Perry. I took him to Torres del Paine.
I love that.
Mine is not nearly as cool, but I brought Matthew with me to San Francisco.
That's pretty cool. Well, as I am a diehard Friends fan, I do have a couple of trivia questions here.
Oh, good.
Let's close this out with a couple of speed round questions. Let's see how good your knowledge is. Here we go. Who is the last in the Friends group to discover that Chandler and Monica are in a relationship?
Is it Ross?
It is, Sarah.
Yay, ding,
That
ding.
is one fan point for you. What is Chandler's middle name? I don't know if you're gonna remember this.
Not me. You don't
Is it
remember.
like Meredith or Muriel or something like that?
Wow.
It is Muriel.
Oh my
And
gosh.
you are a super fan.
Sarah.
Which Friends character ends up naked in a restaurant bathroom?
I don't know any of these.
I
This should
would
be
guess-
this should be obvious given who we're
I would
talking
guess
about.
Joey. Oh, Chandler?
Chandler,
Oh,
yeah,
God,
Chandler.
I don't remember
Yeah.
that episode. Do you guys?
Mm-mm.
I don't remember naked in a restaurant bathroom. I'm gonna
Was
have
it
to go back.
Julia Roberts taking his clothes because he thought he was going to have sex with her in the bathroom?
Oh, maybe. And I love that he actually did date Julia Roberts.
Yeah.
Right.
That was
cool.
fun. I liked
Yeah.
that. Okay, last one. Chandler pretended to move to which country in order to end his relationship with Janice?
Canada.
If you
I
get
want to
this,
say like Kazakhstan, but that isn't right. It's something like that. Yemen.
Wow.
I officially call dubs on Sarah as my trivia partner for Friends Trivia Night. I will find Friends Trivia Night somewhere in Seattle and we will go because you will clearly crush it.
That's so fun.
That was really
Yeah.
impressive, Sarah. Like,
Really impressive.
I mean, I kept waiting for like Smelly Cat, to come up or something, but these were like obscure, difficult questions.
Well, I mean, you guys,
Yes.
I mean,
Monopoly Friends.
I did not realize how much Friends memorabilia I actually have. I mean, but we know that I am a pop culture junkie, so it shouldn't be too much of a surprise, but I was surprised at actually how much I just have randomly laying around my house.
Color me impressed. I mean,
Mm.
amazing, you guys.
Well, I'm just glad that you're my friends.
Oh,
Aw.
love you guys.
I
Thank
would
you.
pee on any of you.
Aw,
You would
Love
not pee. You would not
I said
pee
I-
on.
No, I would pee on it.
You would pee. I would hope you would pee on me if I needed you to. I would hope so.
jellyfish stink. Yep.
Yeah.
Which is different from like a golden shower, just to be clear. just throwing it out there in case there's any confusion.
And Amy, if you decide to bring that wig with you to Vegas, I'm not going to be mad about it.
I think it's happening. I'm kind of digging it. I was
Mhm.
telling Sarah that I think, and I don't remember why I originally got this, but originally it was an Amy Winehouse wig. Which I can see, 'cause there's
Ooh,
like
I
a
can
bump
see
it,
it. Yeah, I can
you
see
know?
that.
Yeah.
Which is why I thought you were Janice, because Janice, if you go back and look, does kind of resemble Amy Winehouse.
Oh, so there you go.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah. All right, gang. Well, on that note, be kind, rewind. Thank you for the honor of your time. Take what you like, because you like it all. Just kidding. And leave the rest behind.